So I did mention in my Alexander Isak videos that a lot was riding on Newcastle's stance, and in the end they've decided that not for sale means not for sale, and that Isak won't be moving on from St James's Park this summer. So from Liverpool's perspective, that's meant moving on to alternative targets, and we now know that the number one target in the centre forward position is Eintracht Frankfurt striker Hugo Ekitike. So with that in mind, we're taking a deep dive into his numbers as we usually do. And I think the question here is not just what's he like as a player, what are his qualities, it's also how does he compare to Isak, because I'm sure a lot of you, like I have, been thinking about Isak and how he might fit in at Liverpool. So clearly Liverpool needs something similar, don't they, in that centre forward position if they can't get Isak. So I think that comparison is worthwhile, and I'm going to try and do that in this video as much as looking at Ekitike himself. So I'm going to start with kind of some straightforward numbers really, and that is that he's got 19 goals and 10 assists, so 29 goal contributions in just 18 months in the Bundesliga with Eintracht Frankfurt. Prior to that, had a fairly disappointing spell at Paris Saint-Germain, 26 appearances, 3 goals. But it's clear now, I think, and I think we've seen this over the last 18 months, he maybe just made that move a little bit too early in his career, needed a bit more time to develop and couldn't quite hack it at PSG at that point. But he's certainly reached maybe that level of his career in the time since then. So he's still young now, by the way. He's still only just this summer turned 23. So there's still some serious room to grow here with this player, but he's already taken some big leaps, and there's a reason he's considered an absolute mega talent among scouts across European football. So obviously he's a striker, so how good is he? And the whole shooting and scoring thing, those things are quite important, aren't they? So we'll have a look, and I'm going to go straight in here with a comparison with Alexander Isak. Albeit, I would say, when you look at these numbers, there's a big caveat here in that he's doing this in a weaker league, isn't he? We know the Premier League is the best league in the world. The Bundesliga doesn't quite compare. And when you think about someone like Jadon Sancho, the struggles he's had making that leap, Timo Werner, another recent example, I think you've got to say, when you look at the numbers there for Ekitike, you've got to bear that in mind. So we'll have a look now. We'll have a look at a graphic that shows the comparison between the two. Now, in terms of goal scoring, you can see 0.48 non-penalty goals per 90. That puts him 74th percentile when compared to other forwards across Europe's top 5 leagues. So not quite at the 0.62 and 88th percentile of Isak. He's a more prolific goal scorer at the moment. But as I say, he's still a developing player. There is more room to grow in that aspect. But I just show you that Isak doing that in a tougher league is very, very impressive. And I would say the other underlying numbers look pretty good as well. So he gets more non-penalty expected goals, he gets more shots, more assists, more shot creating actions. I mean, yes, again, weaker league, absolutely have to bear that in mind. But I think, look, if you're going to put him in a weaker league, you want him to be outperforming Isak, wouldn't you? So that there's some, when he does move to a tougher league, maybe his numbers take a hit, but they still come back to a very high level or an elite level. So it's good that he's outperforming Isak. He's living up to expectations in that sense and doing really, really well. So I think that's, rather than seeing that as a negative, I think that's definitely a positive that he's doing that. And he's also, these numbers show he's outperforming most forwards in Europe's top 5 leagues as well. So, that's impressive. He's doing the job there. He's showing himself up to be a real big talent. And I think, you look at his non-penalty expected goals per 90 last season of 0.68. That is the best in the Bundesliga and 5th in the top 5 leagues as well. So we're talking some serious elite numbers that he's putting up, underlying numbers certainly. Now, of course, as I mentioned in the Isak video, it's not just about getting shots, is it? There's another important aspect in terms of that, as we learned with Darwin Núñez, and it's that you need to be able to finish chances as well. And I think this next graphic as well gives us maybe a good idea of how he does in that regard. So not as impressive in this regard as Isak. So Isak was, over the entirety of his career, he was plus 3.4 goals when you compare the non-penalty goals he'd actually scored versus the expected goals that he'd been given. He'd also overperformed in 5 out of the 7 seasons for which we have available data. And so, that's incredible. It just showed he was a very, very high level finisher. For Ekitike, he's minus 0.3 for his career so far. So scoring slightly fewer than expected over the course of his career, so not an elite level finisher, you would say, or those plus finishers, those kind of outlandish plus finishers, they're hard to find. So, but they are the true elite, I would say, and Isak definitely amongst that. However, that said, I say for 5 seasons of data that we've got available for Ekitike, he's overperformed in 2 seasons. 2 seasons of tiny underperformance there of 0.2 and 0.7 minus. And then a huge underperformance last season of minus 5.3. So that's what's knocked him into the minus for his career overall. And what I would say about that, and there's been some worries about that because he was such a minus finisher, should we call it, last season. Some comparisons to Darwin Núñez in that regard. But what I would say is with Núñez, basically he had a freakish overperformance in terms of his finishing in one season, which just so happened to be the season that Liverpool then decided to sign him. But then you look at the rest of his career and he's been an underperformer across basically all of that. So really the evidence was he's had one freakish season where everything has hit the back of the net. That doesn't look sustainable when you look across his numbers in his career, and yet Liverpool bought him. I thought that was a poor decision in the end, and proved to be a poor decision. Whereas, with Ekitike, he's maybe different. He isn't a career massive underperformer, is he, in terms of his finishing? It's not like he's being propped up by one season of good finishing overall. I mean, he's had one really bad underperformance in terms of his finishing, and then a career where he's around even overall. So, and I would also say as well in terms of this with his finishing is that he doesn't necessarily need to be a plus finisher to be a good fit for this Liverpool side, because Liverpool have got enough of those. They're quite rare and they're difficult to find. But you look, Florian Wirtz is a plus finisher over the course of his career. Mohamed Salah definitely is. These guys who score more goals than he probably should on the basis of the quality of the chances. Now, if you're not going to be that, if you can get someone who's around break even, but they do a lot of other things in terms of positives, that's absolutely fine. The one thing you want to avoid is someone who regularly underperforms like a Darwin Núñez does in terms of finishing. So, it's absolutely fine for him to be around even on that regard. He'll have some plus seasons, some minus seasons, but as long as he's around break even, that tends to be absolutely fine if you are a good shot getter. And I think one of the things we can say about Ekitike is he is absolutely that. I'm going to show you another graphic here that kind of shows it really. Now, this is a comparison to other Bundesliga centre forwards here, and as you can see, he does get good shots and he gets an awful lot of them as well. And just for reference here, so I think this is a good comparison here. The man who's circled in red there, Ekitike is the one in blue. The one who's circled in red is Harry Kane. So pretty similar numbers there in terms of getting the shots and getting good shots there. So, if you're doing that at Harry Kane level, you're going to give yourself a chance of getting a lot of goals, even if you don't quite finish as well as Harry Kane, even if you're not a plus finisher. As long as you're not a minus finisher, you're going to do well there in terms of your goals. And as I say, I think that's the reason that maybe that comparison with Darwin Núñez is a little unfair. Now, of course, one thing I highlighted in the Isak video is that goals are really important, getting shots is really important, but Isak wasn't just an elite finisher, was he? I think that we saw in that video that he was an incredible all-rounder, really involved in possession and clearly kind of a facilitator, which is what Arne Slot spoke about in so many press conferences, didn't he? So I guess we need to make a comparison between the two players in that regard. How good are they on the ball? And again, got another graphic for you here, which I think will show you. And what I think immediately jumped out to me when I looked at this comparison of the two players in possession was just the amount of similarities there. I mean, it's almost like looking at the same picture, really. So both involved in possession in similar amounts, so 22.9 passes attempted per 90 for Ekitike, 22.5 passes attempted per 90 for Isak, so very similar, and both pass completion rates of 75.3%. That's actually freakish, isn't it? They've got the same pass completion rate there, so real similarities there. You can see all the talk about them profiling similarly that we've seen in recent weeks. Definitely proved to be the case in possession. Both also fantastic dribblers, so Ekitike in fact slightly better in this, 96th percentile for successful take-ons and slightly better in progressive carries than Isak as well. And I think the numbers, it's not just those numbers there in terms of against Europe's top 5 leagues, but you look, he was 6th in the Bundesliga last season for successful take-ons, 4th for carries into the penalty area. He's really good at carrying the ball and dribbling. That is a real strength of Ekitike, as much as it is for Alexander Isak as well, actually. So there's similarities there. The Liverpool, they're not daft, are they? If you can't get Isak, they're going to get someone of a similar profile, and I think you can see it there. And I just want to quickly show you a dribble map actually from Ekitike over the course of last season, and you can see there's an awful lot of green, isn't there, in terms of successful take-ons. He's very good at dribbling. And you can also see, which I think, again, similarly to Isak, he will take the ball all over the pitch, not just that left side dominant, which, again, those comparisons, Thierry Henry, Ekitike has had some of those. But you look at him, he can dribble on the right-hand side, he can dribble in central areas, he just wants to get on the ball. So I think that's a worthwhile point, really, in terms of his game in possession. And there's also, actually, when you compare the two here in terms of this, I think there's also a slight difference that I think is definitely worth highlighting in terms of the actual ability on the ball itself. So we know they pass around the same amount, they pass completions pretty similar, they both like to dribble. But in terms of the creativity and the threat that they possess whilst they're in possession, I think there is a bit of a marked difference that's worth talking about. So Ekitike has 10 assists in a season and a half in the Bundesliga for Eintracht Frankfurt. Isak has the same in 3 seasons in the Premier League, and that would make you basically think that Isak's not as good a passer, but I would go against that, to be honest, on the basis of some of the other statistics you can see really here. I think Isak is much better in terms of passing and creating threat from that passing than Ekitike is in this moment of his career, and I think you can see that. So bring that possession graphic up again, you can see Ekitike is down in 67th percentile for progressive passes made per 90, whereas Isak is 87th percentile, so he's doing a lot more of that. He's putting the ball into more dangerous areas. And then I've got another graphic here which shows the expected threat that both players have generated over the course of the last season compared to their positional peers in their respective leagues. And you can see here that Ekitike adds an awful lot of expected threat through carrying, but he's negative in terms of the expected threat that he brings with his passing, whereas Isak is positive for both. So he can dribble, he can carry the ball, and he'll bring expected threat with that, but he can also pass the ball forward and progress it and create threat through that way, whereas Ekitike's got a slight weakness in terms of that, as you can see. And I wanted to that was interesting when I saw that graph. I wanted to look into deeper, why is that? Why is his passing negative expected threat? Why is he not generating more with that? And so what I did is I kind of just wanted to pick out a few games, and I picked out basically the 4 biggest games of the season, which is 2 against Bayer Leverkusen, 2 against Bayern Munich, just to get an idea of why that might be the case. And I think you can see here I've got a pass map for Ekitike across those 4 games, and I think it gives you an idea of why he isn't so much generating the expected threat in those areas with his passing, because you see his passes here, there's a lot of backwards passing, isn't there? There's a lot of kind of dropping in, taking the ball, moving it on, and then going in behind or whatever. He is the guy who's being asked to kind of recycle the ball in that area rather than turn and create something dangerous, whereas Isak is very strong in that regard. I mean, the one thing you would say is that this is clearly something that can improve. He's a young player. I wouldn't say he's the finished product at all, so there's a very much a chance that Arne Slot works with him and improves that aspect of his game. But I do think it's worth noting, and I mean, there's no shame in not being quite as good as Alexander Isak in one regard, because we're talking about, for me, arguably the world's best centre-forward at the moment. As I said in the video, I think he outstrips Haaland in terms of his ability to do absolutely everything. So, to be not quite as good as that is absolutely fine in this moment. But that is an area I think that Liverpool will lose a little bit from not signing Isak, is that ability to progress the ball with passing. But maybe Arne Slot will be able to work on that aspect of his game, and maybe in a system with better players in this style of play, maybe it will just improve on its own as well. But we will see in that regard. So what about the dirty stuff? We talked a little bit about this with Isak, didn't we? The pressing from the front, how important that is. The fact that Isak's wasn't the best in the world at that, and that's maybe something Liverpool would have to mitigate if he were to come into the team. So I'll show you a graphic now, again, another comparison between the two to give you an idea. And I would say when you look at these numbers, again, different leagues is tougher, maybe more comfortable in possession. In the Premier League, maybe better defenders, those aspects when you're closing them down. But I'd say Ekitike doesn't look too bad in this at all, does he really? I mean, those interception figures in particular are very good, and Liverpool will always ask that you get in there, that you can nick the ball and try and intercept it. So he looks very, very good. So that looks suited to me. to press him from the front in an Arne slot system. I mean, I would be wary of the comparison on the aerial figures where Ekitike is better there. It is much harder to win them in the Premier League. It's full of absolute physical freaks, and the Bundesliga definitely isn't. So I wouldn't imagine that's going to translate and that he's going to be dominant in the air. That doesn't seem to be his game. Similar to Isak, really, not an aerially dominant type player. Probably more wants to drop in, take it to feet. Can use his body, but isn't mega strong. So I'll be wary of that aspect. But I do think that interceptions is encouraging. As I say, maybe he will be slightly better suited to the pressing system that Liverpool want to use than Isak, who wasn't terrible when you watched him, but also wasn't elite in that aspect, albeit he was elite in pretty much absolutely everything else, really. So we'll have to see how he gets on in that aspect. And so I guess time to round it off, really. And the way I want to do that is by showing you this wagon wheel, which I think just gives you an overall comparison of the players at a glance. And I think what this really underlines is that these are a remarkably similar profile of player, aren't they? Unbelievable, really. If you can't get Isak, this is very much the player you want to sign in Ekitike, because he does a lot of similar things, albeit in a lower quality league, but he's also younger and has the potential to get better. So he just looks like a very good signing as an alternative. So Liverpool's hope from here is that Ekitike is capable of growing into being the next Isak. I mean, Newcastle clearly thought that could be the case, because that's why they've had interest in him for such a long time. And I do think, just to wrap this up, actually, that Newcastle's interest in this player is something that everyone should be encouraged by, because I don't know if everyone's noticed, but they have been remarkably good in signings in recent years. And as much as they've had that huge investment, they haven't paid crazy sums. They've made very, very smart signings. They've been, the only club really in the Premier League who could compare to Liverpool in terms of the hit rates of signings in recent years. And so the fact that they were so keen on Ekitike for such a long time, missed out on him when he went to PSG. They've missed out on him again this time, it seems, by pulling out of the race. The fact that they like him, I think, says a lot about where this player is going and just how good he is. So, if he can become an Isak regen, then that would be very, very good news for Liverpool, wouldn't it? And you've got to have faith in this recruitment staff as well, because they rarely get them wrong. So I'm very, very interested to see how this player gets on, and excited to see him in a Liverpool shirt. So I'm going to leave it there anyway. Do let me know your thoughts. I want to know what you think about this signing. Obviously, Isak, it's a disappointment to miss out, isn't he? But could Liverpool have got a better replacement or a better alternative target than Ekitike? I think the numbers suggest not, but what do you think? Have you watched him more regularly than I have? Do let me know your thoughts in the comments. Always love to read those. And of course, as ever, if you can like and subscribe, that'd be massively appreciated. Particularly just hit that subscribe button, for goodness sake. I mean, the numbers are going up at the moment. I'm working myself to death in this transfer window because it's been incredibly busy. But if you can subscribe, that always helps. And of course, if you can share the videos and get the word out there, any growth on the channel is massively helpful, because of course there are games to come, there's pre-season to come, the season actually starting with all these new players, loads to look forward to. So do hit that subscribe button and stick your notifications on as well, and I'll see you guys very, very soon.